well?
Yeah, so I guess I should have the camera vertical here. How are we doing this?
Well, you're on your phone, I guess? Is that the...
Yes, I am. But you guys are showing up sideways when I rotate.
Yeah, your camera's not... I don't know if there's an option on the zoom for the phone for this.
Okay. Well, we'll just...
that works perfect, too.
do what we can. So for you, I'm just getting a still image.
Yeah, I'm off the screen.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. And how's my audio?
Your audio sounds good to me.
Great, great. And Kris sounded nice and clear to me. Is Jesse going to be joining us later on, or?
Hopefully he'll be here any second.
Okay. Okay. And Durb said he may be able to come on to talk about new PPEs if the discussion brings us there. Cool. Beyond that, I don't have anybody else that I've invited. Are we live yet?
We are not. We have 2 minutes. Oh, and Jesse's coming in. Here's Jesse.
Outstanding. I'm going to open a window and turn on a fan, and I want you to tell me if you can hear the fan kick on.
Okay. Hey, Jesse, we can't see you.
All right. Any sign of the fan? It's very subliminal.
I didn't hear it.
Okay, good, good. I mean, I can barely hear it. It's like an attic fan that's in sort of the next space over that just kind of creates some suction from here. But
normally I would freak out and be like, no way. But it seems like it was no problems.
Cool.
So Jesse's got to work on getting his audio and video set up. If you want to chat briefly about...
Maybe just have her introduction.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, we know how to do these all on the fly. I suppose we have. It's now officially 2:00. Should I just give it a go?
Yeah. Do you want to have a title image or anything like that for the first few seconds?
Yeah, I would. Where'd it go? It was somewhere. I had it. I was showing it. Yeah, but it's not here, so I'm just going to. I'm just going to go live.
Okay, and so whoever's talking is going to be visible. Is that how it works?
Right now, you're both on.
Okay, sounds good.
3, 2, 1.
All right. Hey, thanks everyone for tuning in. Welcome to today's webcast, which is touching on a fairly important subject, and I hope that anyone who can't make it to today's live webcast is able to tune in later. This will be recorded and available for future replays. This is important information. And the star of the show here today is Kris LaChance, and she's been involved with safety in the tattoo and piercing arena for longer than many of us have been tattooing, and it's going to have a lot to say on the subject. We're going to talk about how to get back to work safely and all the different facets of that.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for having me.
So where would you like to begin? Now, I'm first going to say that I'd like to kind of steer clear of the political aspect of this discussion, because I think it's sort of pointless, because everyone has a point and there's a middle ground in there somewhere that we're going to have to find together. And there's going to be some pain involved in it. And we do have to balance all these considerations. And so somebody's going to start first. We've got some states like Georgia that have already gone back to tattooing. And this includes some artists who are very conscientious, intelligent people who no doubt are going to be doing everything possible. So I'm curious to know, if you were a shop owner right now and you were getting ready to reopen your doors, what are some of the first things that you would do differently compared to last year?
Well, I am a shop owner, so all of this and everything it's putting, trying, like you said, there's so many levels of what's going on here, and trying to separate and disseminate all this information that's coming at us and keep it health focused, health based. That's the name of the game. is how are we going to do what we do safely for ourselves. I mean, general public is important too, but artists have an exponentially higher, always have had a much higher risk of exposure than clients do. So, like you said, anyone in the industry, we've practiced standard precautions. We've taken it upon ourselves to make sure that we're making every effort and taking every effort to reduce and minimize our risk, right? We know this is a risk industry. We know that when we start. And everything we do from the time we walk in till the time we leave is risk mitigation. And it's adding those protective layers of minimizing our risk to hopefully get us down to a point where our risk is manageable and where we can, with the proper protections and protocols in place, do what we do safely, right? But there's always going to be a risk. So there's no 100% safe way to do anything, including driving a car or anything. But especially in a studio environment, the big twist and change that this has over, say, hepatitis or MRSA or the things we've traditionally dealt with is it's brand new to the human species. So we're still learning. How is this virus going to mutate and change and they're treatment wise, and they're still finding different aspects of how it attacks the body and what have you. So but all we can do, like in our environment, is know that risk exists, know it's a very real risk, and logically break down what are the best steps we can take to protect ourselves.
Okay, well,
So,
the big change compared to other risks that we've dealt with in the past, those have primarily been bloodborne and surface type problems. Now we're entering into airborne, which is totally different. I mean, it's intimidating.
it is, and we're all, and that's, I guess that was my point. We're all pretty well versed in how to handle the bloodborne exposure, right? It's that airborne component that is going to be the new level of minimization, the new level of personal protective equipment, the added layer, another added layer of protocols and surface barriers, and how we're protecting ourselves, and how we're taking the time before a client's appointment, the day before, getting a hold of people and asking them some questions. How are you feeling? Have you had any exposure? Have you traveled? To try to, again, before the client even gets here, minimize. But taking into and appreciating the fact that a symptomatic client is actually our best defense if we can catch them before they ever get here. And if someone's symptomatic, we know there's something going on. It's the asymptomatic client. It's the fact that people can contract this and have it for weeks and have no idea they have it. And at some point, someone is going to tattoo someone asymptomatic, and that exposure is going to happen. So it's approaching our back to work strategy in a way that's where we're operating from, is taking, again, that standard precautions approach where everyone's infected. Everyone's
Right.
an asymptomatic carrier. And if we're following that in protocol, that's the safest way, I feel, to go about it.
So now, in terms of actual state regulation type things, we're probably going to have to be ahead of that. And hopefully, as with many states have, we'll be able to get them to listen to us and say, listen, these are the precautions we have taken. This is as thorough as we can come up with in a way that can actually be implemented. And let's consider that when rewriting the law. And hopefully it'll be like that. No, as it stands right now, there's been no changes that I know of, correct? This
Correct.
early stage.
And just as pre-COVID, when you look state to state and sometimes county to county within a state, there's such a lack of consistency, and not just consistency, but there's rules and regulations being written by people and enforcing by people that they don't know what we do. They're not familiar with what we do. And so it's unrealistic and sometimes not even safe. And So it's not what's happening to us, it's what we do with what's happening to us right now. And this is the time for tattooing to, we're all batting for the same team here. Every artist is different, every shop runs differently. No one is telling anyone how to run their business, or apply their art form per se. It's a matter of coming to a common consensus, a consciousness of we all love what we love. That this is our, it's not just a livelihood, you know what I mean? It's a lot deeper than that. And we have the opportunity, like right now, if we can get a consistent base of knowledge out there, because health departments don't know. They don't know what the hell they're doing on a public health platform right now, let alone us. We're always the afterthought to those people. You know what I mean? So now is the time, if we don't want to be overregulated or outregulated, to somehow come to an agreement, and I think it's a matter of, it shouldn't be a dictated, this is what you have to do. It's coming to a collective agreement of, yes, this is best practice, but this is a safe minimum practice. There has to be a safe minimum. If you choose to go above minimum, man, more power to you. But below that minimum safe practice is dangerous. And to understand where your risks are and where you are dangerous. So not just saying you have to wear an N95 mask, but why? Understanding why these things are coming into play and how they best protect you, I think is important in getting that message out for compliance.
Well, and also just like with using gloves and understanding that the way you put them on and take them off matters, we're going to have to kind of work through the whole routine, not just with the mask, but some people are wearing those net gaiters over the mask, which, can provide extra protection and it looks cooler, but, there's more handling. So all of this stuff, we're going to have to work out our smooth procedures and
this is new territory.
Yeah, so I guess there's probably going to be some, very soon we're probably going to be seeing some specific like instructional videos of artists showing how they do all this stuff. And I mean, we are an industry that's really good about sharing this kind of information. Hopefully word will get out quickly. Sure. And, although some people disagree with states like Georgia about starting early, they are going to be the places that are going to try these things out first. And right. They're going to have valuable things to share with us, their successes and failures.
Learning curves.
Yeah. So we're here in Illinois. The one thing that legally has changed, and of course, we're still on lockdown for one more month as an industry here, but then we're going to be expected any industry that brings you closer than 6 feet, that you'd be wearing masks. And of course, that would be us. And there would be no exceptions for any industry. So, it'd be ridiculous that anyone here would want to argue it, but there are those that will. And just like when latex gloves came into use, there were those that argued that, I'm sure. And there were the ones that didn't last. And then, of course, there are going to be those that are going to never feel comfortable without it ever again.
Yeah. And I think that's where the education component is so important. And that if it's just dictated that this is the protocol now and this is what you have to do with no understanding of why that's in place, there's going to be a lot more pushback with that versus this is all about protecting the artist. Yes, we need to protect our clients too, and there's steps there. But I've always held true to the opinion that if the artist is protecting themselves at the best level possible, the client is more than safe in that environment, because the exposure risk is the majority of it, 90% of it is on the artist, not the client.
Right. Well, and this is one of the interesting things about masks that has been discussed, as the idea that you're protecting others as much as you're protecting yourself, if not more. And there was this analogy, and maybe you've seen it. I saw this posted earlier. Kind of funny, the peeing analogy. Let's say you and another person are both naked and that person pees on you. You get all the pee on you, right? If you're wearing pants and they're not, and they pee, you'll still get a lot of it soaking through. But if they're wearing pants when they pee, almost all of it's going to be stopped by their pants. End of story. right? So, I mean,
It's a good analogy.
not to make a joke out of it, but the protection is very much two-way. And, just like with putting disposable barriers over your surfaces, you may have done an excellent job of cleaning and sanitizing those surfaces, but by putting that additional protection, you're not only minimizing how much of your new client's blood is getting on that surface, but you're also stopping any spots that you might have missed from coming through from your previous client. So there's that two-way protection, and we need to accept that and be okay with it, even though it may not be comfortable for everybody at first.
Change is never comfortable for anyone, and I don't like it any more than anyone else does, but it's wrapping your head around the benefit of that change, and once we grasp that and we get ourselves more familiar with this uncharted territory, and I don't think we're ever going to be comfortable, because the risk is always there, but definitely educated and aware and proactive instead of reactive, that it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay, and we're going to find the way, and it's going to take, again, that collective. There's no one person that has all the answers. There's just not. And there's so many levels to all of it that, there's always going to be a situation or a scenario that you just can't plan for. Like, look where we are in the world right now. You know what I mean? It's trying to just, have plan to be proactive instead of reactive, I guess, is the best way I can say it. And like you said, taking every precaution and every additional measure you can take. But again, you don't want to, we're not trying to be in, full on bio respirator suits to tattoo. I think that's a little over, you know what I mean? A little over.
Yeah. Well,
so where is that healthy minimum or healthy?
There's going to be different circumstances too, I think. For example, we may find that COVID becomes a seasonal thing, that after a while it kind of settles into a seasonal pattern, and that additional precautions are going to be necessary during that season. And you can go back to your standard precautions at the time when that's not going on. And it's probably going to become standard precautions to wear masks all year. I think that's just going to become such a thing for every industry that, and of course, when it's off season, we'll have our masks off when we're at the counter and talking to people and all that stuff. And when it's season and is on, we're going to be very airtight about it. I think as a civilization, we're going to be adapting to this thing.
Yeah.
So I would like to invite Jesse Neese on now. He's another person with a lot of experience with health regulations and safety.
Hey, Jesse.
Hey there.
How's it going?
Going good. What do you think of our conversation so far? And what do you have anything specific to say about anything that's been brought up yet?
He just pulled me in, so I just started hearing you guys. I didn't catch what's been said. Sorry.
Okay. So where we're at now is we've just started talking about the fact that we're going to be making these big changes in our industry, and that they're likely to be permanent. We're not going to, I don't think, and most scientists don't think, we're going to get done with COVID and leave it behind us. We're now going to have it as part of our pulse. Probably we're going to have a COVID season the way that we have a flu season. But first, it may take up to a couple of years for it to settle into that kind of a pattern. It's going to have to rampage its way through our civilization a couple times in order to settle into that season. We're going to have to find that sort of herd immunity. So we're going to have to find all these different ways of doing business just in order to keep existing as a profession. And obviously wearing masks is just the beginning of it. I'd like to hear what you would have to say if you were opening your shop tomorrow and you had a list of things that you're doing differently. What would those things be?
Right, definitely. That's part of what we've been working on. I don't know how much you guys have already talked about kind of what we've been working on behind the scenes, but I've been on Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting since we stopped being in our studios. I'm involved with, I'm on the board of directors for the Alliance of Professional Tattooists, and I'm also involved with a couple alphabet soup groups, the AFDO, the Association of Food and Drug Officials, which I got invited to by Piercer Steve Joyner, who most of you guys probably know. Steve's so awesome with APP over the years that he felt like he kept getting asked to speak about tattoo related things and just didn't feel like he was quite the expert. And when he originally hit me up to be a part of this group, I said, dude, out of everyone you know, why me? You know, I'm kind of Joe Nobody to a lot of people. And he said that he knew me well enough to know that I could speak in English and I could, be eloquent when I need to on occasion. But also that I gave a shit. Excuse the language. It's the best way I can phrase that one after just saying I'm eloquent. But there's so many of us that when I first showed up in the tattoo industry, you and several other people were instantly cool talking to me about things, told me about, kind of what I needed to know as a new dude showing up. Several people gave me smart advice, like just leave. 20 years later, I'm still around. But I did feel like it's at the point where a lot of the people who've kind of carried the weight for 40 plus years, making sure tattooing was as safe and up to date as possible, are at the age where they're either retiring from tattooing. Some of the people have been, some of your mentors, things like that. Or they're at the point where those of us who are in our 40s or so, and those who are younger, really need to pick up the ball and take care of tattooing the way it's taking care of us. So part of what I started doing is just trying to be a fly on the wall to hear any feedback coming from these groups, make sure that we were being spoken for as an industry and as practitioners mostly. There were several manufacturers involved and whatnot, but I wanted to make sure that we, the artists, had a speaking voice in there. So I've been in these meetings and I've been trying to kind of have everybody's voice, not just my opinion. I've stated a few opinions about the people who are concerned about having to wear masks at all, just to make sure that it's in the mix in the conversation being said. I'm going to get used to it, but I'm not thrilled at all about it. I don't think that the masks are going to necessarily work as well as we'd like them to in the close proximity that we are with people. If I spend 4 hours with somebody, unless we're both wearing perfectly fitted N95 masks, it's not likely that they're going to protect people. That being said, whatever steps we can take are what's important to take. So I'm going to be wearing a mask, absolutely, whether I feel like it's going to be the most comfortable option or not. I'm mostly worried about the fact that I'm pretty chatty. I like to talk to my clients all day long. I'm not in the generation where I put a pair of headphones on and ignore somebody. I know that's something that you're all about too, Guy, because I know you like to specifically schedule people that you can have a good conversation with.
Find a good mask that you can talk under. That there are such things. You'll get comfortable with it. It feels weird at first, but you'll get comfortable with it, and it isn't necessarily going to limit your conversation. The sense of connection with the client, of being able to see each other's face. Unfortunately, this is just where we're at. We're going to have to. There's also the face shields, but of course, that's something you would almost wear in addition to a mask. You would have to have a complete shield with a respirator to, replace the function of a mask.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand what the different reasons for wearing a mask are. And a lot of tattoo artists being new to this don't quite realize if you're wearing a mask because you're worried about your cough compromising somebody else, then all you need is a mask. If you're worried about somebody else coughing in your face, then you absolutely have to wear a mask and kind of eye protection. It's mandatory by OSHA at that point. So it really comes down to why we're wearing the masks. Each wearing a mask to protect the other person, eye protection's kind of yes or no. If we're wearing a mask to protect us personally, the eye protection is essential. I think that having both parties wearing a mask is, if there's any chance, like if it's during a season when there's a lot of COVID cases, that would be a bare minimum. You would have to have both the client and so some of the shops that I have seen opening, that's one of the things they're asking. If you show up and you don't have a mask, one will be provided for you. And there's a lot of just minimization of interaction and of contact. Like, in-person consultations are going to be either a thing of the past or very minimized. You're not going to be bringing your friend or your spouse. Some of the shops that are opening now aren't allowing you to wait in the waiting room. You wait in your car and we'll let you know when we're ready for you.
just everything that can be done to minimize that contact. And ultimately, you are sitting with this one person for many hours, though, and they could be asymptomatic. And even during that asymptomatic period, there's a lot of virus breeding in the throat. So I don't know what you can do beyond that. If you've got really good ventilation in the room, maybe, or if that's just going to be pulling it past your face faster, that's a tough one.
That's one we've researched quite a bit. We didn't, both of the different groups, both the APT and the BAEA, I didn't mention earlier. It's a spin-off group from the AFDO. BAEA is Body Art Education Alliance. That's a group that we formed for APP, APT, different health organizations, and AFDO to all work together. So between BAEA and AFDO, we came up with a recommendation for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. The APTs, we kept a little bit more basic. We really want to make sure absolutely that people could fulfill what they wanted on there. We didn't want to put something in about air filtration, since so many of us can't affect that in our buildings.
Right.
With a lot of us being renters, not owning our spaces, there are some in studio units that we've been looking at. One of our board members, or ex-board members, Don, will probably have an article available pretty soon comparing different units. There's one for about $1,000. That's probably a decent unit with charcoal capture, UV light in there, changes the air in a space every 4 minutes. Things like that obviously are a little bit out of most of our price range after just missing 2 months of work, but they're things that we might want to look at in the future as far as really getting our spaces to what we want to for these things.
Yeah, actually, we've got that in our house. Is a pair of really high power UV bulbs, and even when we're not running the climate control, I always have the house air getting pushed past that, just to, because we have a lot of mold and stuff that grows out here in the country, and that helps neutralize some of that.
When we bought our house, we had 2 units put into our HVAC system, so we've got the same kind of thing just built in.
Bingo. Yep. So here's a question: in your shop, do you have an open plan, or does each artist have their own room?
We're open. We each have a pretty large space, and we have half walls. But I'm so chatty. I like talking to the client that my friend, that my other artist is tattooing. I like talking to the other artists. So that's gonna be one of the changes that we're gonna make at this point. Is I'm doing a few switching around things at the studio, so we'll probably be a little more private room set up. We've got one private. Well, we have 2 private rooms. One of them's just been used as a photography studio for a while, but we'll probably. Luckily I have a small studio. I'm our primary artist, and I've got one other artist who's going towards full time.
Gotcha.
So we have a pretty easy time being separate, even if we were going to stay in the open plan. But,
okay, so I also wanted to ask Kris the same question. Kris, you're still here, right?
I'm still here.
All right. So your studio, it's a very long established studio. Now, is it an open plan kind of situation there too, or is it separate rooms?
We have separate rooms, with the exception of initially they were all separate rooms, and because we are very social animals, at one point we decided to take down a wall and make one room into a big room with 2 stations, right? But the majority of the rooms are separated, and even in the big room, there are ways to cost effectively, whether that's running some type of a wire and vinyl shower curtain, something that can be cleaned and disinfected, that can be pulled across. There are definitely ways to separate those open floor plans where you're not having to invest in a complete build out to do so. But a huge change for us is, we've always been a street shop with custom ability, and we're in a Big Ten college town. So going to appointment only, we've always taken appointments, but we've allowed walk-ins. So that will cease. That's going to be a huge change in how we're approaching everything, for sure.
Yeah, the walk-in thing. Now, what do you think is going to be the next best way to connect with new clients if walk-ins aren't really a thing anymore?
I think we all have the benefit of social media these days that, in years past we did not have. and like what we're doing right now, whether that's the Zoom call, and there's so many platforms because of necessity, just in education alone, with teachers and what have you, of being able to reach, clients. So like you said, doing consultations, still being able to face interact, but maybe not physically be in the same room with people. And I hope at some point, once we get a handle on this, again, it's probably going to be a year or two, that you may be able to allow, with with control, obviously, walk-ins again. But that might be, we don't know, but that might be a thing of the past for everybody. And you know
Yeah.
staggering appointments, allowing that extra time. You know how long your procedure is going to take, but you have to add additional time to make sure that everything, cleaning, disinfection, possibly shutting down, midday for an hour or so, just to, give an overhaul to everything. From point of entry to point of exit, things are, there's going to be levels of protection we just haven't had before.
Right. So, with that subject in mind, I've invited Durb Morrison, who runs True Tattoo Supply, to come on. He's made a lot of posts recently about new PPEs that they are experimenting with in their catalog. And of course, this is a gold rush industry, so there's all this new stuff. And Durb is also a guy that takes feedback and tries to come up with new things, not just using things that are already available out there. I don't know if he's online right now, but he'll be popping in pretty soon.
He is online. And
what's up, everyone?
Hey, Durb.
Hey,
How you guys doing?
Oh, we're doing good. Thanks for joining us.
Heck yeah.
Oh, there you
All
are.
right, got this thing working. I don't know what background. I think I got Darth Vader back there or something.
Awesome.
For you guys. How you guys doing? Everybody hanging in there?
Yeah. So what is the plan for reopening Red Tree? When does that happen? And what is the law in Ohio right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no real tentative date to open Red Tree right at the moment. It just keeps getting pushed back by the governor. At this point, we understand it's probably going to be June 1st. Could be longer, depending on what's going to go on. But as far as reopening, we are already sent some things into motion with reopening. A lot of it's going to be hand sanitizing areas and things like that. Before you even come into the studio, we're going to have some of them, like hand and body wipes, just disinfecting wipes. That the main thing is going to be the hands, obviously, and then make sure that every client has masks on, before they even enter the door. So there's going to be procedures as the clients enter the door as far as sanitation. They have to provide their own masks. If not, we obviously have them at the studio as well. Then when you enter, we're also doing all the release forms are going to be done before the client even shows up, so nobody's sharing pens or anything like that. So we're switching to online digital release forms that the artists are going to be sending off to their clients before they even show up. So everything's kind of done. Client will come in, go up to the room. There's also another sanitation shelf with hand sanitation stuff that'll be there for them. And then pretty much it's up to the artist to contain the client. We're separating the artist restroom from the client restroom. And then pretty much like we're already a private studio, so I don't think that's going to be a factor because there's already social distancing at the studio with it being so big. If we need to, we'll expand into our lower part of the studio to make more distancing for people.
What kind of distance do you have right now?
Right now, our separate booths, each artist is probably about 8 to 10 feet apart, separate rooms across hallways, things like that. There's one booth in particular I've already got my eye on that I'm moving the one chair further away. But right now, social distancing at the studio is not an issue whatsoever. It's mainly we're concerned about the procedures that the state's going to want upon entry of any studio. No walk-ins, things like that, which were appointment only already. Consultations and pre-client artist talks are going to be a big thing. How you feeling? What's your temperature like? Things like that. Staying closer contact about your health and your client's health together. If artists do get exposed to somebody that had it, they're going to be quarantined and asked to, stay away and things like that. If a client has knowingly had it and recovered, we're going to want a doctor's note. I think that's going to be one of the things too, if you've actually had it, to because we don't know how contagious it is for how long, things like that. So little requirements like that. I actually have if you go to redtreetattoo.com and you click over to about, I actually have created a COVID-19 guidelines thing that actually states a lot of these stages and steps that we're doing. So you'll find a whole client requirements, you'll find artist requirements, and then you'll see some other stuff that's been presented to the state of Ohio, to the governor, actually, through that petition that was going on.
Okay. What was that link again?
Redtreetattoo.com.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
and then you'll see all that.
If I remember my history correctly, Ohio was one of the first states where the state regulators, this is back before there were a lot of tattoo regulations at all, where the state regulators actually met with and listened to tattoo artists in shaping the tattoo legislation. And in fact, that was the bill that ended up being used as a model for many other states, including here in Illinois.
I was on that panel of artists back in 1998. Actually, there was, I think there was like 20 artists that were on that panel back then that all came together. Yeah, and it was taken from other laws from other states and stuff like that and refined. Yeah, that was back in 1998. A lot of things have been revised and edited with addendums to it, to the body art document here in Columbus. Like at one point, disposable tubes, because they weren't written into law, legally you weren't allowed to even use disposable tubes. So that's one thing that I didn't have really an invested interest, but it just made more sense to get disposable tubes into law. So I'm sure there's going to be different regulations. The body art document's probably going to change a little bit here in Ohio for sure.
So I'd like to pop back to Kris for just 1 second. Kris, do you think that there needs to be, or maybe there already is, a time, an effort among the industry in every state to sort of get together and figure out what these changes should be and get ready to talk to state regulators? What do you think is the best way for them to go about doing that?
Man, that's the big one, right? So coming together as an industry is imperative, really. To get a, like we said earlier, a consensus of what is best for us and how do we want to be regulated, and to have that say instead of it coming from external sources that aren't in the, as you say, the front lines every day. So platforms and they're being created as they're needed and happening now. Tattooing Beyond COVID just launched last week, and I know many people are working on things, and if there's some way that getting, and I'm not even saying like-minded, because not saying we should all think the same or do the same, but it's health-based. What is the safest, healthiest way to protect ourselves so that we can take this opportunity to put a consistent set of guidelines out there, not requirements, not telling anybody what to do, but these are guidelines. Again, this is, safest minimum practice. This is, you want to go above that, this is best practice, but this is dangerous, and trying to put forth a cohesive set of guidelines that are somewhat consistent, that say this is, from the industry, this is the safest way we feel, this is the safest way to go about from here forward. Because again, like you said, in a few years from now, once there's better control on this, it may be taken down to a risk level of seasonal flu, but it's also more contagious regardless. So during that season, there are going to be more considerations, but in the interim from here to then, and we don't know when then is, because the virus dictates that. We don't, we're on its timeline really, and so how do we manage and mitigate our risks and minimize? There's no complete elimination of risk, right? There's steps we can take
just like before. There was never a complete, but I think that most people in the industry had gotten very comfortable with the level of risk and the type of management that we were doing for it, and we could probably arrive at some kind of equilibrium like that with this as well. So I guess, long story short, anyone out there who is interested in being involved in your state's effort to get together people in your industry and talk to the state regulators and make sure that any future changes that are going to happen are not stupid. I guess, Kris, you think maybe start with that group you had just mentioned, Tattooing Beyond COVID, or Jesse, you got any recommendations?
And collaborating with existing, you know what I mean? We have professional organizations, but even on those, there's lack of consistency. So it's a matter of trying to work, from within the industry first. I think the key is, and with the, groups like that, is that it's tattooers, it's tattooers trying to have open conversations, and every situation, like I said, every scenario is different, every studio is different, every artist is a little different. So there's no one person that's going to be able to come out and say, this is the way we do it. It's got to be.
And there's going to be some trial and error too.
For sure.
So before I lose this train of thought, I wanted to go back to Durb. So what are some new things, some new PPEs? Now, this is something we hadn't even thought of that term before, PPEs, like personal personal protection equipment. And the things that we're used to using, obviously, would be gloves. Some of us, I've been using these aprons, the got you covered aprons for the last couple, year or so. And I really like those. I feel a lot better protected. I don't feel like I have to ditch my clothes as soon as I walk in the house like I used to.
Yeah, you tattoo very covered every time I've been tattooed, full sleeves and everything.
So what are some new things that you've got at True Tattoo Supply that are, new technologies or new things being offered? Yeah,
we just kind of started. It's funny because clientele kind of flipped, when tattooing was kind of shut off. It switched purely to medical supplies, really. All we were selling was like Maticide wipes, gloves, masks when we had them in, but those sold out within days.
Man, I stocked up on Ergo Squish before any of this happened, just to make sure you weren't going to run out.
Right? Yeah. So it's been pretty crazy. Yeah, masks, they sold out pretty fast. So we actually, said it to my manager. I was like, it's a time where, we obviously need to focus a little bit more on carrying more medical supplies now, as well as tattoo supplies. And it's funny because from like an inside perspective, I could see just everything switch over, and tattoo supplies kind of stopped. They're selling again now, and you can see the industry picking up a little bit in certain states. But things that we've added, we're obviously we weren't even carrying just regular disposable masks before. We now have face shields. We've increased some of like the hand sanitation wipes. We now have like more natural ones too. So we have Maticide wipes. Then we have just basic hand wipes like tea tree, eucalyptus wipes. What else we got here? A lot of the more medical sprays and stuff like that. Disposable sleeves, like the clear plastic disposable sleeves, just for more coverage. Aprons, pretty much full artist covering. The face shields are something that some of my artists are going to wear. Some of them are going to wear masks. Some of them are going to wear probably the face shields, like Fawn. I know Fawn wants to wear the face shield that she has and things like that. Other than that, we are looking into carrying more masks again, rubbing alcohol, prep pads, things like that. So I think the artist covering is going to be a big thing, just covering themselves a little bit more, not just for our safety, but for the comfort of the clients and things like that. But I think that the clients are also going to be kind of wearing masks. They might bring in their own face shields, things like that. So,
but when you go to the dentist, you don't expect them to be there in their street clothes. You want to see them covered with an apron and everything else. It's
So I think it's going definitely in more of that context. Well, we've seen certain artists like Gunner's been wearing masks and stuff. We've seen him tattooing pretty heavily covered. So we have seen this, certain artists that have been way more covered, and it's kind of coming full circle and making sense now. Some
Chinese artists actually I've been seeing wearing masks for a couple of years, and
exactly.
Of course, they're obviously they deal with viruses more than we do because of their population and everything else.
Yeah.
So I'd like to invite somebody else on, Litos. He's down in Florida. Florida is opening up, right? And so I'd like to hear a little bit about what that experience is like. Litos, are you still around?
Where you
He
at,
might be
Litos?
trying to connect for a couple of years, and yeah, exactly. You know, of course.
Oh shit!
There
Yeah.
you
We deal with viruses more than we.
Litos, you need to turn off the stream.
So,
turn off the stream.
I'd like
Please.
to put somebody else on, Litos. He's down in Florida.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah. Okay.
What's up, everybody?
All right.
What's up, dude?
That's pretty interesting there. So that's the mask and shield together. And of course, you could still, you know, air could flow under the chin or that sort of thing. But if somebody sneezes in your face, you're good.
Yeah.
The-
But just for lack of, for conversation here, just it is a new normal thing that actually some people actually are already using, like Japan is mandatory. And there's a lot of things that we actually try to implement it here, because if you really go to the CDC suggestions for everybody there, it's kind of lacking. We are already way ahead of the game because, just another day in the office, we have these precautions, all the medical cleaning supplies and everything else. I've been trying to communicate with our governor because the phase 1 starts now Monday. And unfortunately, we fall in the same spectrum as the barbershops and massage parlors, anything in proximity. It's not really fair when we are training bloodborne pathogens and cross-contaminations and everything else to be stapled at the same thing. Because if somebody can actually go to a restaurant and sit at the table with multiple people, have somebody bring the food to you in that proximity, it kind of serves the purpose. What we try to do, which unfortunately we change our ways, it's like closing the doors by appointment only. When they come in, they would be taken, we have infrared thermometer that their temperature will be tested before they enter the premises. Also us, when we come in, our artists will be tested for the temperature. We have, arm sleeves, gowns. The face shield is actually the only way for us to protect ourselves, like surgeons do, is either having those walls that you put your arm through, which, it can't be functional that way. So we felt that the actual shield, you wearing the shield and the mask, it's a double protection, plus the client as well using that and making that mandatory. I know it's a pain ass, it's just something that is just very uncomfortable, but for time period, it's gonna be necessary. We need to kind of try to kind of go way beyond what everybody's using it, because our industry is already, obviously it changed quite a bit over the years, but we have to be an example to separate ourselves from the other ones that actually don't have to be as intense as we do.
Right. So let me just get my facts straight here. You're legally able to open on Monday. Is that?
No, not
No,
us.
no. Okay. Not okay. So.
Yeah, probably the phase 2. And hopefully phase 2, like, Durb was saying, we don't know. We don't have a date. So hopefully nobody on the phase 1 screws it up. The phase 2 will be the next step. So that's what we're hoping for. But I created some guidelines that were sent to Governor DeSantis in Florida, and hopefully get somebody to look at them and maybe bring our date for opening, not that we're rushing to do anything, to have more of a different outlet to how we conduct business. And it is, again, even though the doors are open, if you don't feel comfortable opening your studio, that is your prerogative. That's completely fine. I might not feel comfortable at all, but I am going way beyond way to protect ourselves, my crew and my clients and my family, because that's all it takes. You can be negative today and you can be positive 5 minutes from now. So you always have to be with the guards up,
The thing that I think we can draw some kind of confidence from is that there are a lot of physicians who are right in the heart of the front lines that are religious about their PPEs and they're not getting sick. So we can do the same, and we're in a much lower risk environment than they are. Although, you never know what you're dealing with, what's walking in the door. We have to treat it the same way we've treated everybody's blood, as if we're dealing with someone who's infected.
Exactly.
Yeah, luckily a lot of us are already trained in a lot of those, bloodborne pathogens, first aid, just basic cross contaminations and the way the viruses can spread through studios. So I think we're already one step ahead of the average business owner, to tell you the truth, just because of the nature, like you said, Guy, we've been dealing with blood for forever. So
okay, so there's a
lot of us-
couple. I'm sorry, not to interrupt you. Before I forget, there's a couple of
Mhm.
questions that are rolling in that we can. Well, the first one, Durb, is specifically for you. Someone's wondering when Maticide is going to be back in stock, and I guess that question would go towards masks and things like that as well, since some things are obviously there's been a rush on them and they're all gone. Are these things going to be how's your supply chain looking right now?
it's funny because suppliers actually slow down a lot too with the heavy demand with the medical supplies. We have more Maticide on the way right now. Actually, it's more of the sprays and the gallons. So we're not getting the wipes back in right away. Same thing with gloves. We're lucky we just got a new pallet of gloves, but it was getting close. So it seems like everybody, especially the medical industry, is overwhelmed right now with everything. And it trickles down to even the tattoo supply companies, even trying to get their pallets in. So we should have Maticide this coming week. We should have masks this coming week. Gloves are fully stocked, so we're doing good on that. But it's been a little bit more of a challenge, keeping some of those items in. I don't know if it's because the manufacturers are slower, or if it's the just overwhelming demand for the items.
So, okay, I wanted to just say in general to everyone who's listening right now, we are taking questions. You can type them in at the chat room, and we've got somebody kind of, narrowing them down if there's any repeat questions, so that, and we'll try to get to the most important ones. Gabe, there was one from Amy Ward. Could you read off that question, please?
And it says, even if everyone is tested, how does that address the asymptomatic clients?
Right. Okay. So Litos, let's ask you that first. So you've got people getting tested with your infrared thermometer, and of course everyone's being completely covered. Well, all the artists are completely covered, and the clients are asked to wear masks and face coverings. Do you think that is enough to address the large number of people? Probably a good proportion of people who actually catch this virus either don't show symptoms or walk around for quite a while before they do.
Yeah, that's a tricky one because it's an invisible guess, right? And I think the only thing we can do is pretty much start with the communication with the client beforehand. So the communication becomes through the consultation and asking questions about their medical conditions, if they're being exposed, if they travel from places that were hot zones. I mean, it's just the normal questions you have to say just to veer off on the door. When they come in, if somebody has a higher temperature, obviously it's your choice to tell them, say, unfortunately, I can't conduct business with you for these reasons. That has to be established right away in the beginning. Actually, if you can communicate with them and say, unfortunately, we are taking temperature. That's the number one test that we can do it at the door. And don't feel bad that for both of our protections that I might send you if you have a higher temperature. That's a start. And once they enter, having all those things overkill with protection, like they were gonna sanitize their hand on entry. And what we would ask them as well is actually be aware of other things that probably get overlooked. Not only cleaning their hands, but let's say if they wear glasses, to sanitize your glasses, their cell phone that they're always touching before they enter our premises. I think that you have to kind of do that. That nobody's going to come in with a friend or a family member, unfortunately, for a while. That minimizes that contact as well. And us keeping both of us protected with shields and masks and gloves and gowns and arm sleeves, and keeping the distance even when we're inside. Because in my studio, what we did is I'm actually up front. And I separated all the studios. We have 5 artists, and we have 4 corners in the back, and I'm in the front. we have 12 to 15 feet between artists. We felt that was safer to do that so we can conduct business and still keep in mind that nobody goes in the same place at the same time. We take turns and respectfully and safely conduct business. And that's all we can do it at the time, you know.
Yeah. So like if you're waiting for the stencil machine, you wait at your workstation until whoever's using it comes out of the stencil prep area, and just those kinds of things.
Yeah, and not only that, let's say we going to implement some protocol. Let's say if I go in the back and I make a stencil and I use the stencil machine and the copier, it's my job to actually sanitize after I use it. And we made some signs that says this has been cleaned and sterilized for the next client. This way I'll place it on top of everything that I touch. This way the next artist in line don't have to worry, did he clean it? It's like one of those things. You just shut the door, did you lock the business? So it can't be a guessing game. It has to be my job to make it comfortable for the next one in line, and so on and so on.
Yeah, everyone's going to have this extra layer of protection to address. Everyone's going to need to do their part, and it's going to become second nature.
Yes, and actually, my wife Julie, she's going to be here present with us and actually overseeing the operation, meaning we're going to conduct business with everybody following protocol, and she's going to go after between everybody just to double check. When the client comes in, she goes in the door, cleans it in and out. And she's going to be kind of supervising things that get overlooked, because I know it's going to be a system that we're not used to it, and we're going to make some mistakes along the way. So if we have a couple eyes to kind of oversee everybody, I think, more the merrier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it kind of reminds me of when it was at one of Paul Booth's conventions. We had all these collaborations going on at once with artists rotating from person to person. And there was somebody whose job was just to make sure everyone, was monitoring there and observing the separation between the different clients and changing their gloves. Like if you change from the left side of the client to the right side of the same client, and you and that other artist trade places, you've got the same gloves on. But if you're moving to the next artist, the next client is different. And there was so much chaos. We felt, we should have somebody whose job is just to be on top of that.
Yeah, and one funny thing, a story, I think you forgot about it, but I'm going to remind you. When I went, to visit you, and we were doing the collaboration together, we went out, took a break, and we went to that pizza place. And there was a pizza place. The lady was in the back, and she had gloves on, and she was touching other things. And actually, she was going to the other station, and you stop and goes, "Oh, wait. Did you change your gloves? Because I just seen you going from that place to that place." And she stopped and goes, "Oh my God, holy shit." It's like, and this is like, what was that, 12 years ago or something like that? There was nothing around, but your concern and your attention to detail, and actually with that in mind back then, now imagine what our mindset is going to be today and forward.
Well, I mean, honestly, how many of us have had to do that to our dentist?
Yeah.
Hey man, could you swap out your gloves?
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've gone through 5 dentists in the last 10 years.
So, any more audience questions right now?
Yeah, let's see here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There's a bunch of tons of thank yous from all over the place.
You're welcome, everyone.
Let's see.
Welcome.
There's a couple questions about liability and insurance and adding things to, the paperwork. But I think that we probably just have to talk to your lawyers about all that stuff, unless anyone wants to address particular things they're doing in their releases.
Yeah, we just added actually the top of our release form a whole kind of COVID release. Like, I do not knowingly have COVID or been around anybody. It's just a real brief mention right now. That's gonna be part of that digital release form that we'll send to our clients in advance of their appointment. That's about all we've added to our release form so far. How about you guys?
I've updated mine, again, trying to work within the form I have and just adding the pertinent information. The most important thing with the release is, nothing's going to protect us 100%, but as long as the client, it's clear and concise, and they're entering into the agreement to get tattooed with a full understanding of the risks that they're assuming and the rights that they are waiving. And as long as, you can spell that out in pretty basic, straightforward language, without having to revamp your entire form. Every state's going to be different, what you can ask specifically in different states. In Michigan, we can't say, do you have anything? We can ask if you have any condition which might affect the healing, but we can't specifically name any disease process. So, but you can also
Yeah, same here in
imply
Ohio.
and get your yes or no on your sign off. Mine, they read the top section, they initial that they read the top section, then they answer the health questionnaire, fill in their information. Their full signature upon filling in their information. So they've already read, initial, filled in, and signed. And then at the end of the procedure, there's a place that says they witnessed everything open in front of them. They had the opportunity to ask questions. They witnessed the needle thrown away in the sharps container, artist initials, client initials. There's a time in and a time out. So if going to court for any liability purpose, they can't say they didn't know because you initialed twice and signed once. You had 3 opportunities, and you're attesting to the fact that you understand, I read, I understood. And then in order to be considered consent legally, you have to give the client a copy of what they informed consent. So if you're sticking with paper releases, definitely look into having them printed on NCR, the no carbon forms, so that there's the white copy on top, yellow on the bottom, you write on it, everything transfers. And at the end, they're given that hard copy. Digital's obviously the way to go if you can go that way. If you're doing paper forms, I've done this for a very long time, and that I order like shop pens with styluses on the top to give to people. We give them a new pen with the form, and we tell them at that time that the pen is yours to keep. And then they also, who doesn't need a pen and it has a stylus, if they're out, touch screening or gas station, they have that with them. So, and I'm happy to share. Every form's different. I'm happy to share what I have, but again, with a disclaimer, every state's different, locales are different. Check with your attorney before you publish anything.
Is there anyone here using the tattoo release form app?
No.
There are a lot of tattoo now people that do, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is a great app. I was just curious to know if they had made any updates as a result of COVID yet. So Jesse, do you have any comments about liability, et cetera?
Yeah, a little bit. There's obviously none of our release forms are going to completely absolve us of any kind of liability. The most important thing is showing that we've informed people of what they're getting into and that they have signed off that they are aware. So, just exactly what Kris was saying, it's really down to educating them on, what the procedure is, what the risks are. No one can ever sign away the right to sue you. These are just documents to kind of back us up. I really argued in some of the meetings about recommending temperature taking and things like that. And after arguing for a while, people pointed out that it's just going to be a cover our asses thing, because we definitely can't tell if somebody has asymptomatic spread of it. The temperature taking is really just to show that as studio owners, we're not being the kind of people to just let Joe 104-degree fever come in off the street. They really kept it as simple as possible just to make sure people could achieve them. We didn't want to put that into our recommendations right now because we were worried that people weren't going to be able to get those thermometers. Nebraska is actually opening some counties to tattoo tomorrow. My studio could open tomorrow, but I'm choosing not to at this point, both because cases are going up in my local area. I've had a 2-day argument with a local piercer who's also a nurse about the fact that our recommendations are to change masks between every client, which is standard for OSHA PPE. You have to change, any PPE between clients. Nurses in my locale in our state are having to wear the same mask all day long through their shift.
I've heard of nurses keeping a mask for a week before disposing them because they're so hard pressed.
It's frightening, especially, if folks have masks available for purchase and those hospital CEOs aren't making any less this year, they can go, where they want to go. It's just ridiculous that they're acting like there's shortages if there really are. At the very minimal, I don't consider surgical masks all that great. They're obviously not N95, but at the very least, they shouldn't be having to wear one of those in between multiple rooms of people. He was discussing that they're having to put a mask over their mask if they go into some place at a risk. And double gloving has always been stupid. Double masking sounds just as stupid. I've been arguing with this dude for a week now on what are we going to do next? Not change gloves in between clients. But he thinks it's strange that we as tattoo artists would have higher standards than they're able to use currently in the medical field. I've been arguing that they're essential and they would have to work with no gloves and no masks if they had to, whereas we have a choice to keep our studios closed if we don't have the adequate things to protect our clients. There are ways we can not overuse those things. At this point, with masks being in short supply, we're planning on using a mask, changing it after each client, but putting it into a paper bag with that artist's name, setting aside for 72 hours in an area where we could then potentially reuse that mask again. I'm probably going to get a UV light so we can even, try to put those under a UV light. Obviously, once masks are in total supply everywhere, I'm just going to throw the things away instead of have to worry about any of that. But if my local nurses don't have enough masks, I feel ridiculous trying to use up some of their supplies. I actually purchased a 3D printer, and I've got a couple friends who are going to be 3D printing some of the ear savers and things like that, try to distribute those around. I think anything our studios can do to either purchase from Durb, purchase from the folks who, are selling more to our industry than medical places, all the better. Some of the big suppliers like Henry Schein at this point are not letting tattoo suppliers purchase from them the way they normally do. They are specifically routing everything towards medical folks. They're not even letting dentists purchase things right now.
Oh,
Yeah, that's where it's exactly what I'm talking about. Like the demand from the medical industry to some of these companies is keeping it from the tattoo industry.
Well, and I'm so glad you guys are stepping up. I'm actually on a list with their representative will contact me the second tattoo studios are able to purchase for them, and I will make sure everybody knows that one. Otherwise, I'd rather everyone purchase things from you and keep you doing right.
I appreciate that.
But
Yeah, that's a big
there's
problem.
definitely some things going on out there that we can do to keep ourselves safer as far as workplace practices. The APT is, we were talking earlier about groups. The Alliance of Professional Tattooists is a trade group for all of us. We're not the tattoo police. We're not telling anybody how to do things. If you don't like how we do things, join the group and have a voice in it. That's the number one way to do things.
here's a question.
Yeah.
Since you're involved with the APT, could someone approach the APT about helping find or mount an effort in their state towards getting some tattooers together and being able to approach the lawmakers?
Absolutely. We've done a lot of that. When people ask kind of what APT does for them, which has always been the big question, in addition to having discounts at several of the insurance providers, PPIB, things like that, that more or less just covers your cost of joining. The big thing that APT has done for years is just try to have a unified voice. We actually sent a representative down. One of our ex-board members went down to Kentucky when they were going to pass regulations against tattooing over scars and presented them with several things that they were going over the top in their regulations. Early APT, the idea was to make sure we could regulate ourselves and didn't have any regulation. Obviously, as the decades have passed, regulation is going to happen no matter what. My role as one of the younger people involved for a long time was to really try to bridge that gap between the older, no, screw those people mentality and not have anything to do with regulators and try to form some of those relationships. Weirdly, I got a lot of the pigment manufacturers involved, not weirdly, and on purpose. I got a lot of the pigment manufacturers involved in the BAEA and AFDO because I was concerned that I was going to say something over the top that would put us all out of business. I wanted to make sure there was a leash on me to not say dumb shit like, what about sterile bottles and things like that.
Well, it's always a great idea to get, as many people involved as possible. And so that the unified voice is coming from a broad base. So we've got time for maybe one or two more questions.
Everyone knows that the different groups that I'm involved in, the BAEA and AFDO, anyone can join. That's not any kind of exclusive thing. If there's artists who really are concerned, if they want to have a voice, if they want to, just find out what's going on, they can absolutely hit me up and I can give them the information to join that. It's also been in several APT newsletters just to make sure folks know that they can be connected to these folks too. the best thing that I want to get people information wise out of there is these groups, AFDO and BAEA, even though there are regulatory folks in there, the old idea that they'd want to shut us down is so off the map. These guys really, really want to help us out. They're actually putting in their off time during their jobs. They're doing all these nonprofit group meetings and things, mainly to make sure that we get brought up to speed to be where the food industry is, make sure our pigments have been tested, make sure that we know that they're safe. They're doing some really cool things on that direction to make sure that things like titanium should be a slam dunk to get approved. It's already used in tons of cosmetics. So what they're doing is going through a route to get it approved the same way it is for cosmetics, which obviously is a giant can of worms, could go all kinds of directions. But at the heart of it, I do feel that the people that I'm working with have our best interests in mind.
Yeah,
Nice.
this group that you guys are involved, it's the what makes a difference is pretty much uniting our forces. And actually that's what happened in the past when, we had so many regulations. They wanted to close down tattooing because we have to be under supervision of a doctor. So we had to kind of go and lobby it to define what that was, change the law to where the doctor didn't have to sit in a tattoo studio. What's happening now is that it's not just this moment. You got to realize all the regulations, all the stipulations for pigments are going to be even harder. But what's got to keep in mind is that if we unite our group like we're doing right now and support our own, and actually Durb, that's, people don't know that. Let's say somebody goes in his website and try to order something, he doesn't have it, is the fact that he's working really hard to get responses, to get this material in to support our industry. And people have to understand it's nothing personal. It's not sitting on his ass and not doing anything 24/7. He's searching for things. So we all searching for things. But what got to keep in mind is this. Now it's going to be harder to get things in the future because now it wasn't just the black glove that only tattooers had. Because now it's police officers, it's doctors, it's restaurants, any field that kind of has to have this kind of barrier. So it's going to be harder to get gloves because all the manufacturers are in Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and China. So everybody's going to be ordering what we use the most. So keep that in mind. It's not just today. It's going to be an effort for us to understand that it's going to be a lack of. So if you get a hand on something, you got to support, people like Durb and all the suppliers that are serious in the business to actually support, our industry. Because if we have contacts, if we have access to those, and keeping another thing in mind, cartridges are made in China. Just saying. So it's going to be a lack in there because everybody's going to be buying stuff that we need.
Well,
So
Cheyenne cartridges are made in India and Germany. So, I mean, they're not all made in China. So there are some exceptions.
Yeah, that's the great news, right?
Yeah.
And I think too, part of your studio protocols and the coming back plan is, allowing extra time to place these orders, making sure you're doing an inventory on a regular basis and taking into account that it's not just medical, dental, and tattooing or body art that needs the PPE. The general public is being told to wear masks. The general public is being told to wear gloves. So now everyone is needing the same things we've always needed. So placing those orders well in advance, keeping in contact with your suppliers to see where their supply chain is. And
not letting yourself run low.
Yeah,
well, that's what I was
run
saying
low.
earlier too. It's a very different, it's definitely a different industry for all of us, as far as actually tattooing. But yeah, from the inside, from the supplier point, it's changed. It's not as easy to get stuff. Like Litos was saying, like
I think the manufacturers are going to step up their pace too, I would expect.
Yeah, I think that this happens so quickly that, it just took everybody by storm, every industry by storm. So I think that people right now are trying to step it up. I know even toilet paper manufacturers are trying to step up their supply. So it'll eventually catch up. But right now, like Litos said, like people that were not wearing gloves yesterday are now wearing gloves and masks. And so that's putting an overwhelming demand on just the whole medical industry. So I'm sure they'll catch up, but this happened so quickly for all of us. It changed life, it changed the industries, it changed careers, and as long as it's been that we've all been kind of isolated, it's still at the beginning of reorganizing and figuring out how life is now.
Yeah, well, just like everything else that's happened, this industry has just gotten stronger through all its challenges.
Yeah.
There's no reason why it's going to be any different with this. I feel like this little break that we've all had to take, there's been a chance to do a lot of rethinking and reprioritizing, and a lot of us are gonna, I think a lot of us are gonna come out of this with, you know, an updated approach, not just, you know, wearing PPEs, but everything about, you know, like even what you, if you're not going to be tattooing as many people, maybe being more picky with the projects you take and focusing more on building your artistic strengths, so that you can have a more specialized clientele and not have to work on as many walk-ins, things like that. I mean, we're all going to have a chance to go back into it with kind of a, you know, the curtain is closed and reopened, and what's this new scene going to be like?
Hey, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, we do.
Okay, fantastic. There's a couple people that are asking about how everyone's addressing the difference. You know, this is now an airborne virus as opposed to bloodborne. And so, while acknowledging that not everybody is in a control over their airflow in their environment, people are asking about air purifiers, additional ventilation, and ultimately, you know, what do we need to do differently now that this is could be aerosolized? Sorry, my pronunciation.
Yes.
Point being, okay, you got it. So maybe if everyone could address how they're dealing with that in their studios.
Well, first, let's just recap what we've talked about so far, right? We've got minimization of any unnecessary people in the studio, or not coming in until your appointment's just about to start, right? So the number of human hours going on in that studio are kept to the bare minimum of just the artists and their clients while they're tattooing. We've got the PPAs, and preferably both client and artist, wearing masks, wearing them properly. We've got, you know, of course, hand sanitizer and things like that as well. Just all the things we're doing to just make sure that things are clean in general. But what could we possibly do beyond that? Now, having good airflow is important, but as we were saying before, you don't want it flowing straight from your client towards you, because that'll actually increase your risk of inhaling one of their microbes.
Like I said earlier, I think a lot of it's going to be the pre-sanitization of the client's hands before they get in, keeping your clients contained. And then, like you said, with the airflow, that's a tricky one. You could have little air purifiers within each little workstation possibly, but I think the cleanup afterwards too. So keeping your client contained and then wiping everything down, giving it time between clients, maybe even, you know, don't do 5 appointments a day. Just keep it to 1, wipe down good, and then beat feet, you know, to at least get going again. So that's a big part of it, is clean up after and wipe everything down.
I mean, it's hard because most tattoo shops are sort of open plan, right? Or at least in part. And of course, that's an important part of it, you know. I would hate to give that up, you know. As it stands, like, our 2 workstations are a good distance apart, and they're on rolling carts, so we can make them farther if we need to. But, you know, there's a good 15, 18 feet between workstations, but you can't really isolate the air that one pair of people is breathing from, you know, what's going on at the other end of the room. And are we all really ready to partition off all our spaces? And then after each client, step out and do a complete air circulation before starting the next client. I think that this early round of shops reopening and using all reasonable precautions, with the exception of that, is going to be the only way we can really find out how safe it is. I don't know. Anyone else have any comments?
With
Yeah,
the
I think
aerosolization,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry, Kris. Go ahead.
No, okay. I was just gonna say, with, you know, just like there are many different levels and of masks and you know what they filter out, air filtration is the same, you know, the same. So regardless of what you're, you know, you do your research, do your homework, make sure that, you know, an N95 is much different than a surgical mask, which is much different than an exam mask as far as what percentage of contaminants could come out. And with air purifiers, it's the same thing. You know, a standard when you buy it, you know, Home Depot is going to be a little bit different than the ones that are used in healthcare facilities and medical facilities. Also, if you're looking into UV disinfection, definitely, do your homework on that, because some of that's really dangerous for exposure. So, there's a lot of homework and research to be done. And again, everybody's facility is different. Everybody's going to have to decide what is best for themselves and their studio environment. It's not going to be a one size fits all, but there's definitely going to be best practices out there and best options out there for people to choose from.
Yeah, safest, if you are going to use a UV light for sterilization for anything, what we're planning on doing is having that in a cabinet that when we close it, the light can come on. So that way we're not at all at risk of having our skin exposed for sure. You definitely don't want that shining on you in any way.
Right, just like the ones that we've got in our HVAC systems, like you were talking about, those are inside a sealed box, and all air just gets circulated past that.
And a lot of us rent. We don't own our buildings, so we're somewhat limited as far as what we could do, and a lot of that's very, very expensive and a little bit more cost prohibitive than, installing a new HVAC system for your entire building versus what is best in the individual, work area.
I would be very surprised if we didn't see a new generation of air filters come out as a result of this.
You're right.
Oh, for
The
sure.
Corona filter.
Yeah, there are facilities that actually, some of the pigment manufacturers that they have is an air purified every 15 minutes. There's a spray that goes into the air that actually kills any airborne bacteria. And that's something that's actually obviously costs quite a bit of money. So maybe, like Guy was saying, the implemented different filtrations that actually kind of do a little bit of that will help a little bit. And the thing is that we always been in this precaution stage, and we just tend to forget about it. We're just talking about it now because of the difficulties that we have. But our industry was built from the beginning with lacks of it, and we implemented things a lot that we kind of tend to be comfortable. Now is a way to kind of reawaken that responsibility for protection and safety and everything else, and is stepping up the game. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it's going to elevate our industry even more, so people can see that we're beyond any kind of other businesses, there are out there that even have more contacts than we do. But we just have a more proximity on longevity. They sit with somebody for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours in a day, and that's pretty intense. So the more protection you have is better, and give time for some kind of vaccine or some kind of a help to where when things start de-escalating, we start getting relaxed a little bit again, not implementing so many barriers, but still at the same time, always worrying about not bringing that back.
Yeah, well,
keeping in mind and having that appreciation always, regardless of what stage we're in, what you can't see can make you sick or kill you.
yes,
It's not a visible threat, and it's having that appreciation all the time.
Right.
Well, that's the scariest part about this one too, is people can carry it and not even know it, so it's unlike anything we've all dealt with.
And having protocols in the shop, because you're going to have an asymptomatic client at some point.
Eventually.
So how, when that client having that protocol, like, if within this period of time you develop symptoms and you get sick, you need to let us know, because we've had that exposure. And then how are we going to handle it in-house? Are we going to call anyone that came in the shop within a certain period, or anybody that worked that day needs to quarantine and, maybe alter shifts? So you have certain people that work certain days, but not overlapping in case, there's an outbreak. So your whole shop doesn't have to shut down. You can still have people that, I don't know. There's so many considerations, man.
Very, very complicated. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be hopeful for people, good intentions, but we can't rely on that, because people can lie about it. Even though we're asking questions and doing that, we always have to be extra careful.
Well, people have a weird, like you're saying, they lie about it. People have this weird thing of hiding and downplaying illness and denying it, even to themselves, right? Now, this is right. They would just like ignore it and it'll go away. And so we've got that up against us as well.
Yeah.
But, we are capable of dealing with this. We've dealt with, if we hadn't been on top of our game decades ago, hepatitis could have ended our industry. but that's not what happened. We learned from it, and after New York went through that unfortunate incident with hepatitis, the rest of the industry kind of tightened up their game, and we've always since that moment been sort of at the cutting edge of small industries that have to practice these kinds of precautions.
It's been interesting because Marty Holcomb tattoos at my studio, and he's reminiscing about the days of tattooing through the HIV epidemic, back in the day. And he said tattooing slowed way down to the point where I think he said one year he had 2 clients. So he just, he consistently worked on them, did beautiful bodysuits on. But yeah, he said back then it was kind of what we're going through now. I mean, you were allowed to tattoo back then, but it was such a scary moment for tattooing and people that he had 2 clients for a whole year.
Yeah,
so
well,
it's interesting listening to his take on it and what he's gone through way back in the 80s with tattooing this. The
HIV virus is a terrifying boogeyman, and it was a lot worse back then. People are surviving it now, but where with COVID, you've got such a variety of different opinions of if it's worthy of concern or not, and that's been one of the reasons why there's been such an uneven response to it. But at the end of the day, we need to take universal precautions, just like with every other threat that, health threat that we've had to deal with in tattooing. And as an industry, we can do this. We can do a great job of it. We can be leaders in the world.
Exactly.
So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Kris LaChance, Jesse Neese, Durb Morrison, Litos. Thank you all for this great discussion. I'm Guy Aitchison. Welcome to Hyperspace Studios and our continuing series of quarantine broadcasts. This is number 5, and we will be announcing number 6 sometime soon.
Excellent. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
It's great talking to everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for putting it together.
Thank you all.